Slow today. Everybody's probably podcasting about the NCAA tournament.
Yeah. Well, I guess it'll be fun to watch as a bystander.
Yes. All right. Link there. Hello, Hawkeye fans, and welcome to the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast here on hawkfanatic.com. It is Tuesday or Thursday. It is Thursday. It's not Tuesday. It's Thursday, March the 21st, a little after 9 a.m. Central Time. It is the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast, also known as uh, the guy who creates narratives on NIL and hates Nebraska, and the guy who uh, hates Iowa and is a race baiter. So hopefully you enjoy our commentary on those things. And we're just going to sit here and talk about things like that today. No, we're going to talk about Hawkeye sports. Scott, it's always, I should know better than to engage people on social media, like with a comment that might be advice that I would give people that they don't want to take and want to be mad at me. But um, I don't learn my lesson, and I know you don't either.
I know. I tried to, one of the things I gave up for Lent was snark on Twitter. And I did a really good job until this week, until this. And even then I've really calmed myself down. But there's a couple of times I couldn't let some comments go unanswered. So yes, anytime something controversial happens, then everybody's just got to find somebody to blame and be aggravated with. And this week that's me, I suppose.
And people can be really mean and just personal and tell you to go F yourself. And just there were people that actually use their real names too and live in Iowa City. And it's bizarre, but I digress. What kind of facilitated, or not kind of, what facilitated some of the vitriol on social media this week, particularly the Twitter X machine, which seems to cater to these things? Caden Proctor decided that after deciding that Alabama wasn't for him and he wanted to come home, he's going back to Alabama and not at Iowa. And just a bizarre story, Scott, really, from, all the layers of it are just really strange. But I don't think things like this will be unheard of. In other words, we'll see more of these situations with the current system and setup.
Well, let's take. I'm going to start at the 20,000 foot view and then kind of work my way down. One
But
is this situation will be used on Capitol Hill. It'll be used in every single example as to why there needs to be contracts, why this needs to go internal, and it's because you had an athlete, a tremendous athlete, who decided to enter the portal and in 2 months changed his mind and then left the program after obtaining payment. Now, the payment came from, the Swarm Collective, as we know. It has two veins. One is the 501c3, and that is everybody benefits equally, basically. Hey, you go out and you go to a school and you read, then you get X amount of dollars. The other one is the other one is the LLC, which is businesses flow their money through to get it to the athletes, which is what people really think about when they think about the collective.
their donations.
Yes. Well, the big people donation, the business
Yes.
part of it, the general donations go into that pool that goes to all the athletes. They all benefit from, but it's like the LLC is like Dale Howard Auto, which is where he was which promoted Caden Proctor, or Estella's, which every Thursday night you have Jay Higgins doing his Higgins hotspot or whatever it is, which is awesome. By the way, it's must see TV or must see Instagram live every Thursday night. It's awesome, but that's what people think of, and that's what people thought their money went to, when in fact their money went to the one that spreads it equally. That said, this is what administrators, congressional figures, NCAA officials, coaches will use and say, this is why we need legislation. This is why we need contracts. This is why we need everything. To take it all the way down now, this is a mistake by a prominent football player. Both, and it could have been. I look back at his decision in January when he decided to hit the transfer portal when Nick Saban retired. He had two real veins to go through at that point. One, which is what he did, hit the transfer portal and went home. This is home. He wanted to be here. He had good experiences here. Or he could have stuck it out and said, you know what, let's see what the new coach is like, stick it out here and see what happens at the end of the semester. He chose to come to Iowa. About halfway through his semester at Iowa, he goes on spring break with a bunch of his former Alabama teammates and changes his mind, wants to go back to Alabama. It's not anything nefarious as far as money goes or anything other than the fact that he decided, I kind of want to go there. Now, this is where he needed guidance. This is where, and I don't mean to criticize parents, but whether it's a mentor of sorts, needed to say, you know what, you made this choice. You need to stick with it through the end of the semester. At the end of the semester, if you feel this way again, then yes, there's an open opportunity for you to go back. But it's a high profile situation. You've already gone through half of your time there. Stick it out through the semester and go with it. It should have been one or the other. Either stick it out in Alabama from January through May, make a decision to leave, or stick it out at Iowa through May and then make your decision to leave. Instead of this, which is an absolute mockery of the system. And we've seen decommitments all the time, Rob. We see players, athletes locally who pick different schools and the vitriol that's associated with that. And it's not unique with Iowa. However, in this situation, I kind of get it. I mean, because there was a crowdsourcing way to get money, the emotions attached, prodigal son is returning, and in 2 months to just, on the eve of spring football to bolt. I kind of get the anger on this one. Now, I'm not saying there should be anything attached to that anger, but this was really an unfortunate situation that will be used in the big picture. They may even call it the Caden Proctor rule at some point.
Yeah, the system is broken. And like we're saying, there's a lot of layers to this. And Scott and I started this podcast in the fall of 2020, I believe it was. And we've kind of been through this whole NIL transfer portal. We've discussed this from the jump. And we're not, it's not like we're geniuses or anything, because these things are obvious to see. You can see the pitfalls of this system. And I'm one, and Scott knows this, that's going to look at the student athlete, what benefits them the most, because I think they've gotten the least benefits through time for what they've contributed to this system. So I'm somewhat sensitive to that, and I know that rubs people the wrong way sometimes, but when I see Trev Alberts and Troy Dannon leave in the middle of school years as athletic directors to other schools, not apples to apples, I get that. This situation's different. You have a kid who, was at one school for the college football playoff in January, goes to another school, then goes back to that school. This is an extreme example of that, but I like the freedoms that student athletes have right now. This is not a good look. This is not the right way to handle things, as Scott said on Caden Proctor's term. But on the other hand, this is how he feels. He didn't want to be at Alabama. He wanted to be at Iowa. Then he didn't want to be at Iowa. He wanted to go back to Alabama. And he had to go through this to figure that out. The rules allow him to do that. If the rules are different, if the rules have some type of stipulation, he can't do that. And that's what needs to happen here. So people going in know, hey, I'm leaving Alabama to Iowa. If I go, I can't come back to Alabama for a semester or for however long. And again, the legal process, Scott, here is there are no rules. You can transfer whenever you want. That's not the kid's fault. That's the system's fault. So again, there are a lot of layers to this. I have not talked to Caden Proctor, so I don't know what he was feeling in December or during the season, because there was some talk that he was considering leaving Alabama, but during the season he was considering leaving Alabama after the season. Then he did so. I don't know what was in his head, that or now, then or now. So it's kind of just that process of going through that, and it allows student athletes to do that, but there should be some type of I don't know how you would do it. Just a rule that you have to at least stay a semester at your school. That seems logical to me, and something that would go over well, or at least if we're looking to put something together here. But if you went to court again, but this is just the Wild West, and pointing fingers and blaming people for doing things that they can do within the system, even if it is a bad look. And again, I understand Iowa fans being upset. I'm guessing that Iowa may have sold season tickets based on Caden Proctor coming back here, if that were the case, Scott. But and I understand that they were hyped up for him being here, but it is an individual too that is making decisions that he feels are best for him.
I understand that this is something that can be done, but I think this is a character flaw. This is an issue that, having two kids who just recently, one graduated college last May, the other a couple of years before that. I understand the desire for them. I was the same way, wanted to go home, wanted to move. A personal example was my third year of school. I moved to Arizona. I decided to go to a community college there for a semester. Within a month, I couldn't wait to get back home. But I didn't leave the school in the middle of the semester. I waited till the end of the semester to transfer back. Not that I didn't want to, but I did. And I think there needs to be something said for commitment. That, and again, I was just a student. I was a student in a community college. Who cares? You're talking about a high profile person that there's been a lot of stories. Iowa got a violation for him supporting him. And midway through the semester, I'm going to go back. I go to spring break with my friends, and then all of a sudden, I'm out. See you guys. That's something that somebody needed to step in. Somebody, a mentor type figure, should have said, no, you came back. You made this decision. You stick it out. Now, at the end of the semester, at the end of spring football, if you decide you feel the same way, then make your decision. But there needs to be some sort of level of commitment. I'm all about the student athlete getting what's theirs. I've been that way for a long, long time when it comes to NIL. I mean, when we go back to some of the athletes of the past that we covered that missed out on this. I think of a Marvin McNutt, for instance, and how much would he have made when he was at Iowa, at the height of his marketability, or how much, take your basketball players or whatever. That's perfectly fine. And you mentioned Trev Alberts bolting, Troy Dannon, after 6 months at Washington. Those are examples as to why they need to have this kind of movement. I'm agreeing with that, but it's kind of like in the middle of a football season when somebody make this move. What would you think? I mean, and right now he's only here 2 months, and this is home. This isn't just he's from Texas or something. This is where he's from, and this is why he came back. So I'm highly critical of whether it's the advice he got or the advice he didn't get. And I understand he's a young man, and young people make poor decisions from time to time, but there's also a lot of resources, and there needs to be a little bit more of a big picture. And again, with this situation, this is one that's going to stand out. This is one that when NCAA officials and school administrators and coaches go to Capitol Hill and look for protections, this is going to be identified as the main reason why. Look at what happened here, and if you're a business who funneled money to him thinking, all right, we got our guy, and then all of a sudden, I'm bolting, I'm leaving, I'm going back. I mean, you've got to feel pretty cheated financially too. And then you've seen a lot of people quit the swarm already, that whether they joined it just because of this. So this has wide reaching ramifications, and it's more than just one athlete. But I think in this situation, that it's one thing to decommit on signing day. It's another thing to change your mind once. But this is something, even if he could be a first round draft pick in a couple of years, and we all understand that. But this is something that will be discussed in NFL rooms as well, that there is a character flaw here and it needs to be identified. Now, going in the future, maybe he grows up. Maybe he'll see that wasn't the smartest move. Maybe even Alabama to begin with was the bad move. And I think that probably was the case. But at this point, I'm all for leverage. I'm all for leaving at the end of the semester, but leaving midway through on the eve of spring football practice when everybody expected him to be there. And then, oh, yeah, I had fun on my spring break with my former teammates. I'm going to go back there. That's a bitter pill to swallow.
Yeah, no doubt. And I don't disagree with what you're saying. I think, it was not handled well by Caden Proctor. However you want to slice it, it was not handled well. And, I can't speak to his character because this is just one decision that's very public and very, very, very important in terms of money. And those make things more important when so much money is involved. Maturing is not linear, right? My son will be 19 tomorrow. Our son, I like to say. I don't like to say mine because there's two of us that, and I did less work bringing him in here. But and I get text messages from him. Hey, I'm short on the utilities this month because he's living downtown. Can you PayPal me some money? And I'm like, so I'm kind of living this. He graduated the same year as Caden Proctor, and I'm exposed to his friends too, same age, and everybody's a different maturity level. What we can hope here is Caden Proctor learns from this situation, but ultimately Caden Proctor was allowed to do what he did because of the system. And that to me is the main issue here. Is what we've talked about, Scott, now for 4 years almost, is the NCAA let this happen. This is so then when we go back to court and there's the Caden Proctor situation of, okay, here's an example of what happens because of the way this thing is. Okay, Mr. NCAA, well, how did this happen? How was he allowed to do this? Was this your responsibility to maybe fix this at the front end? Yeah, it was. So now you're asking us for help after you screwed it up in the first place. So that's kind of where I am in that.
Yeah. And I don't disagree with that at all because I've known for a long time that they have been 15 steps slow, and I go back to,
I think what we're saying here is a lot of things can be true in this situation.
Yeah. Exactly. Everything from Caden Proctor not making the most mature decision in the world to the NCAA and the schools form the NCAA. A lot of times we put this big monolithic bureaucracy that is the NCAA up here, and then all of a sudden it's like, the schools they're part of it. They're the ones who make the rules. They're the ones on the committees. Yes, there are people there, but it's not just this, magical judge, slamming a hammer down and making things terrible for Noah Shannon or for making things terrible for Iowa in multiple ways, which seems to be the path here. And so many from the gambling stuff to this to whatever. It's like, God, Iowa is like the whipping boy here. But I think what we also, what we look at and what I've looked at is 10 years ago was when this was heading in a direction that they could not handle, and they chose to ignore it. It's like, Krypton in Superman 1. They knew things were going to break up. They ignored it. We had the warmest February in the world, but we're ignoring it anyway. But when we're talking about this situation, when you got King Coulter trying to unionize athletes, and you had Shabazz Napier talking about going to bed hungry, everybody rolled their eyes, but then they realized, you know what, he's got a point. The school should be able to feed their athletes. I remember when Jim Delaney talked about giving schools up to the full cost of attendance, and that added another $3,000 to $5,000 to their scholarships, and people were freaking out. And yep. I remember a lot of like UNI fans, for instance, coming at and saying, "Oh man, this means that we can't compete with Iowa. They're going to get $3,000 or $4,000 more." And I'm like, you couldn't compete with Iowa anyway. What's this matter? And then other people are like, oh, this means Iowa can't compete with Texas. If they're going to get 5,000, these guys are going to get 3. And I'm like, the athletes are not that shallow to go somewhere different for $2,000. Lord knows what they're getting under the table. But at that point, when all those trigger points were happening, they ignored it. And they decided, let's just continue to push through and fight through the Supreme Court. And by the most polarized Supreme Court we've ever seen in the history of this country, they decided 9-0 that the NCAA was wrong. And they've been slapped down every single juncture because they couldn't handle their business. And now you look at this, and yes, this is a dreadful situation. It's of their own making. Now, the question is, and I think Charlie Baker has a better idea. Mark Emmert, was just a horrific, leader. I don't even know if there's a Hall of Fame for NCAA leadership, he shouldn't be in it. And again, the member institutions are the people that are the organizations that put him in that position. Exactly. What he kind of gets, and I think the only path forward to revamping this system from a governance perspective is to allow the athletes to unionize, to collectively bargain, and probably at some point bring payment under the house of each university. And how does that part work? How much are they going to get paid? I don't know. I mean, how much do they get paid now? Whatever they want, whatever the market says they get paid. So I think that's the only way you can prevent this, to have somebody like, let's say, a Caden Proctor, when he first goes to Alabama and you get X amount of pay, but you have to sign a 3-year contract. And if you break that contract, you owe us X amount of money. That's really the only way you're going to have to do it, because now coaches can leave now, but they all have buyout clauses. They all have to pay back, at least if they leave. Same thing with administrators. I think Trev Alberts was like in the neighborhood of $4 million that Texas A&M will pay for him. And that's what's going to happen with athletes. But at this point, they don't have any reason to want to change the system, because it's now completely in their benefit. It's not unlike what we saw with Major League Baseball 50 years ago with Kurt Flood, and that the owners fought it, and instead of like the NFL, and they fought it too, but they were able to get a salary cap with a floor that you have to pay and parameters. Baseball, that's where we saw teams break up, and a system that's really not benefited the sport, and it's benefited the individual, not the sport. So anyway, I'm on a lot of soapboxes here. I'm doing I'm like breakdancing. It's a complicated thing, Scott, and I know I keep saying layers, but there's so much to this that we could talk about this, and we have talked about it for hours. I wonder how much time we've spent on this conversation over the years in this podcast. And I want to be clear too, when I tweeted out that let's not accuse a kid of stealing NIL money before we have details, my point there is, and I want to be clear with this, if Caden Proctor took $500,000 and ran, I'm not for that. That's not what I'm saying. If he went and appeared and did a commercial for a car dealership, or helped with Big Brothers and Big Sisters, or whatever, United Way, whatever, and made money for that,
he earned that money. He should keep that money. But if he got money from the University of Iowa, especially a significant amount of money, and just took it, that's not right. I don't think that's right. And no, I mean, it'd be hard to press. You'd be hard pressed to find somebody rational that would think that is right. And that's kind of where I think what you're talking about, Scott, about the universities paying the student athletes and not having collectives. I think that's the way they should go. Who knows if they will? And another thing, Brad Heinrich and the Swarm, I know people were coming at them. They're not responsible for any of this stuff. They're doing a lot of work that they don't even really get paid for. They're trying to help the university. And again, I know this is probably people are tired of hearing at it. It is the system. It's more that than anything else. But I'm with you. It does speak to somebody's character if they were to come in, take a bunch of money, Quinn Ewers, and go to another school. That's not cool to me. That's not doing, I don't want to say your side or the people that you represent or your part of this equation. That does not represent it well. And that shouldn't be what student athletes are doing, because if they want to continue to have freedoms and have more freedoms, they can't do things like that. Or as Scott said, when they show back up in court, now the NCAA and the member institutions have ammunition to fight against what's going on right now.
Exactly. And that's why, on one end, if you're the institution, now this is, a lot of people think, hey, you're getting a scholarship, and that's it. Well, that system is gone. And
I've 1950.
Yeah. And I've never felt like that was fair enough. When you
especially with how much money we're talking about now, Scott. This isn't like back when Hayden Fry was making $250 a year.
Yeah, right. I mean, the last 25 years has shown us. I mean, if you look at budgets for each school, I mean, hell, like I remember the first time I came back here and I did Iowa's budget. It was like for the athletics department, it was like $46 million, which seemed like a lot. That was the 2006 budget.
So we're talking almost 20 years.
Almost 20 years ago. And now, the latest NCAA figure that they got, $167 million. And you're looking at, now Kirk's salary hasn't really grown like that. But at that point, remember, Kirk's salary was a big deal in that era, and he's the highest paid coach. And they're, and Bob Bowlesby saying the only thing worse than being in the arms race is not being in the arms race. And then you saw, BTN and the amount of money that came out of there. And you saw this money. And then at the same time, you're going, what are the athletes getting for this? Oh, well, you're getting a free education. Oh, well, you can't have cream cheese on your cracker, but you can have a cracker for, and if you're a walk-on, you can't eat at all except on game day. Those are the things that it's swung now the other way, and rightly so. There's no reason that an athlete can't go back, even a third team guy on the depth chart can't go back to his hometown in small town Iowa and work on a camp and make, $1,000, make a couple $100, whatever it is. Just because of his name. I mean, and that goes for all sports, volleyball or basketball or whatever. I mean, and then of course we look at Caitlin Clark, and she absolutely deserves everything she gets. So, and then think back 5 years ago, she wouldn't have got any of it.
Yeah.
And, she's making millions now. So it's just,
I think Megan Gustafson and Luca Garza probably could have made some money.
Absolutely. They could have, no question. I mean, Frank Garza would have made a lot of money too. but and Spencer Lee chose kind of not to in his own ways, a little mercurial that way, but then you look back at any of these athletes that we've covered that have been great, that have done such good things, that could have done more and could have made more money and boost their profile, and what the long-term ramifications of an athlete to be able to, when you're in this market and you do such a good job promoting yourself or then you can come back here and do the same thing. I think look at like Jay Higgins. I mean, that Estella's Thursday night
I haven't
show.
caught that yet. I
Oh,
didn't realize that was going on, but I'll check it out. I'm not an Instagram guy much,
yeah.
but I'll have to check that out.
I watched it one time. I think it was when I was in Indy for the combine. And he hops on. He's on with Luke Lachey. They're talking about stuff. Then here's Cooper DeJean, and they're talking about all kinds of stuff. And at one point, it was hilarious, and I was a little bit embarrassed because Jay just says something to Luke like, so how's your rehab going? And he was like being real straight. He goes, "Dude, I'm not media." you don't talk like to me like I'm media, and all this stuff. So it was pretty funny. But I think about Jay. I mean, who knows what kind of NFL career he's going to have? But having this opportunity in this market and do those things and expand probably this year and next year, and when he's 32 years old and football's over with, he could come back here and be a spokesman. He can go live with me in Cedar Rapids. He could do all kinds of different things. And this, to me, boosting your brand. I talked to some athletes from Holy Cross yesterday about that. And they're like, yeah, I know NIL's been great because it's not a lot of money for us, but we're getting our brands. They're getting a little money. They're getting spending money. They're getting whatever they're getting. And then it's boosting your brand. It's being able to go out in public, and businesses notice that. And if you hook up with the right business, that may lead you to bigger opportunities down the road. I remember writing in December about the Duke's Mayo Bowl, and then they decided we're going to go with an NIL marketplace here. And what they did was they had businesses in Charlotte kind of hop in and start talking to the West Virginia and North Carolina athletes, and Fortune 500 companies. And if you're an athlete at West Virginia or at North Carolina and you're looking, I'm probably not going to get to do anything, that's an opportunity down the road. That's what's perfect about this system. But what happened with Caden Proctor and ultimately how it impacts Iowa football is a really unfortunate byproduct that will be cited by everybody in the future.
And I'm sure we'll be talking about this on into the future until they figure it out and fix the system. There are going to be instances like this. Caden Proctor is not the last instance of this, but as Scott said, he may be the example used because his move was kind of the poster of what's wrong with this. But as Scott said, let's talk about the impact on Iowa football. He was penciled in to be the left tackle, and now he's gone. Mason Richmond was going to kick inside the guard. Now he goes back out to left tackle, I would assume. And if I'm Mason Richmond, I'm saying, hey, about that NIL money, I'm back at left tackle. I'm kidding. Kind of. But let's talk about that, Scott. Let's talk about the offensive line and the impact of Caden Proctor leaving. I know you wrote about this the other day.
Yeah, I did like, and this is the impact of Caden Proctor's situation. First, it blew my complete Tuesday out of the water. I mean, not only writing this, but I had to rewrite my pre. I had, that was one of my high points that, hey, he can come in here and they can do this, 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 and this, and now they can't. First of all, they return every starter from the original starting lineup from last year. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? We'll find out. But Mason Richmond's been a 3-year starter at left tackle. His future position is probably inside the guard, but if he's the best left tackle in the team, that's where he'll play. Nick DeYoung, at first you're kind of like, do you really want him? Well, he's good. He's back and he's playing. Logan Jones is back. Jennings Dunker is back at right tackle. Connor Colby's back at right guard. So they have their entire unit there back. Plus Bo Stevens, who had 10 starts 2 years ago. They have, Tyler Ellsbury, they have some, but now instead of shuffling everything and having great depth, now you're going to have somebody step up, and they can, I feel for Trevor Lauk going from number 74 to 59 for no reason.
He can get it back, right?
I'm sure he could, but would he want to?
Yeah.
Hey, screw that, but
And another part of this, Scott, before I forget, and maybe you were going to mention this, but another ramification of what Proctor did is if Iowa wanted to add somebody else in the portal to have for spring football on the offensive line, he pretty much poo-pooed that by coming here and then leaving.
And this goes back to also when he decommitted right before signing day, because Iowa people were very sensitive. They knew the situation with him. They thought they had a chance to kind of write it out and keep him, but they didn't want to tip anything one way or the other. So they were really tepid in how they went in the portal back in late 2022, because they were like, well, if they look like they're going to go after a tackle, then maybe they need to, then maybe he tips it the other way. And of course, that's because he's a 5-star. If he was a 3-star, they wouldn't give a shit. But what this means on the field, though, and this is the part that's probably the biggest bummer of it all, is that Iowa has really struggled since Alaric Jackson has been in there and running outside zone. It's been a real problem area for them. They just don't. A lot of times they don't get vertical on the edge, and that doesn't allow the running back to find the seam to hit it and go the way they want to. Caden Proctor would have allowed them to do that. He's a monster out there. He would have been great. And now, maybe a healthy Mason Richmond allows them to do that. He's not been healthy. Last year, he really fought through injuries. Tough kid, great kid. But, now do they have to say, well, we're going to have to go more counter again, gap again. We just can't run that outside zone the way we want to. And then Tim Lester trying to set up an offense. I'm sure he looked at it and went, wow, okay, I'm going to have this 5-star left tackle.
And I've got a guy who started 3 years at left tackle at left guard right next to him, man. I can go outside zone.
Yeah, I can do whatever I want here with this. And now you're like, oh boy. But we've seen adversity hit this football program a million times, and they always respond. I expect them to circle the wagons, players, coaches, especially players. We don't need them. We're fine. Whether it's chip on their shoulder or just, hey, we are who we are. We're going to be Iowa. And, if he's not fully committed, then we're fine with this. I could see that being used to their benefit, and this is one situation, Rob, where there's no ambiguity for me on this, that I don't blame Iowa at all. 100% football. They are in the right here, and they're going to come out strong. So, I
agree with you. I think Iowa did right by Caden Proctor throughout this whole process. I'm on board with that. Iowa has treated him and given him the respect that he felt he deserved this whole process. I don't think that was reciprocated.
Yes.
I feel comfortable saying that.
Yes. I look at, I feel for somebody like Tyler Barnes, who worked his ass off to try to get Caden here the first time, and worked through things that they wouldn't do for most players to try to keep him intact. And then, right after that, he talked about mourning a little bit and how tough this is, but he's like, we got a 24-hour rule in recruiting, and we, and it sucks, but here we are. And then last fall, he's, Caden's struggling against Texas. And I think it was Mike Farrell tweeted, oh, it looks like Iowa, fans are going to be rooting for this. And he's like, no, we're rooting for the kid. And then he texts him, hey, hang in there, buddy. And then
not tampering, by the way.
It's not. Well, officially not. Officially it is, but it's not. It's his relationship. Genuinely.
It's officially a crock of shit, is what it is.
Yeah, exactly. And then all these
the rules are comical. What they enforce and what they don't is comical. But anyway, I'm sorry.
No, you're right. And and he gets dinged for that level 3. It's impermissible contact, and scared that he might lose his job, because he's trying to reach out and support a guy. Now were there other ulterior motives? I'm not going to predict that, but it worked in some ways because then he decided, I'm going to come back. And it's like the prodigal son is here. And they moved heaven and earth. They are over on scholarships. They even gave him 74. He decided to do it late. They made sure he got enrolled in classes. They got him moved in with people. They got him worked an arrangement with, or led him to the collective to get, some payment. They did everything right, and they were excited about him. And then this happens. Come on, man. So, but again, Iowa weathers storms better than any other program in the country. They may not be the best team in the country or best program in the country, but they handle adversity better than any team in the country. And I expect them to do it this way too. And they're going to be like, and this is one time, we go into these spring press conferences like next week with Kirk. And a lot of times we're like, he might say, well, I'm only going to talk about this once and move on. I agree with him on this one. I'm going to address this once and that's it, because, maybe it's too strong to say he's dead to me, but they have no reason to bring his name up ever again.
No, I think this is a done deal now. I think the Caden Proctor saga is over in terms of how it relates to the University of Iowa. And just to Scott's point here, just to maybe give people a little bit of, I don't know what the term would be, comfort, so to speak. And Scott spoke to this a little bit. If you're looking at it, Mason Richmond has, he started 39 games. Connor Colby has started 37 games. Logan Jones has started 27 games. Jennings Dunker started 14 games last year, and I believe he had a start at right guard as a sophomore. Nick DeYoung, 24 college starts under his belt, all across the line. So he's a great utility guy. Tyler Ellsbury has played 37 games at Iowa and had some starts at center in place of the injured Logan Jones. Bo Stevens, as Scott mentioned, started 10 games at right guard in 2022. This is not a young, inexperienced offensive line without Caden Proctor. This is an offensive line that should be better this year.
Yeah. And that's going to be on George Barnett and his team now. I don't know how much of it, the problems on offense were offensive line related last year, or quarterback or receiver, or injuries to tight end. Yes, you could say yes to across the board. But now that they've got, out of the people we mentioned, and then you throw Ellsbury in there, I think he had 3 starts, 2 or 3. You're talking, 151 starts for that unit, and they're all back. All the starters from the original lineup from last year. The only guy they're missing is Rusty, and so that's it. So you need to, now that they're older, maybe they're not as talented as they want them to be, but they got to be a pretty good unit. And we've seen Iowa with, modest talent perform, very well. And I think 2016, when they won the Joe Moore Award, granted, they had James Daniels. He was uber talented, but he was only a sophomore at that point. But when you got Cole Croston and Boone Myers and Ike Bucker and guys like that are performing, this unit can do the same thing. So this is up to George Barnett. This is up to Kirk Ferentz. This is up to all of them. And I don't know. I'm pretty positive that they're going to be a much better unit this year.
There's some young guys too that are coming up, Scott, that I think could push a little bit too, and we'll talk a lot more about that as we get into the spring. But I'm not, cashing in on the old line because Caden Proctor left. Would have been better with him. Yeah, it would have. But you can't go back. His choice, and we move on. Want to let folks know that support for this podcast comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. That is sui.org. Thank you so much to Systems Unlimited for the great work in the community for over half a century, and we certainly appreciate them supporting this podcast. We're going to hear from a few more folks that support the pod, and Scott and I will be back shortly on the other side. Hang in there. We're back on the Hotspot podcast to let you know that switching is easy. We do it all the time. We switch on the lights, we switch TV channels. Some of us switch partners while square dancing. Well, that's a stretch, but what's not a stretch is how you can switch and save with State Farm. In fact, State Farm agent Chad Birch right here in Iowa City can switch you over so you can start saving today. Chad and his team are ready to welcome you to the State Farm neighborhood. With Chad Birch, it's easy to switch and save. Just give him a call when you need the real deal, like a good neighbor. State Farm is there. And we'll get into somebody who is sponsored by State Farm shortly here, but I don't want to I want to mention the pro day, Scott. I don't want, we'll have more time for the NFL draft and that stuff, and we'll dedicate more time to that. But hit us with the headlines. Joe Evans, a good workout. Cooper DeJean update.
Yeah, first with Cooper DeJean, who will be a first-round draft pick, the first since Tommy Knight in 1997 for a defensive back at Iowa, which is really impressive and shocking if you think about it.
It is surprising when you think about all the guys that have been in the league.
Yeah, I mean, a Josh Jackson or a Desmond King or Bob Sanders,
Micah Hyde,
all of them that have been second rounders or fifth rounders, Amani Hooker and the like. But he will be a first rounder. His workout will be April 15th. And he did the right thing by not working out at pro day. He did the right thing by not working out at the combine, because he wants to prove that he's a cornerback, because cornerbacks make more money, than safeties do. Anybody could play. It's kind of like kick inside the guard talk, he's got short arms, all that. We heard that a million times at Iowa, but in this case, it's the same thing here. But he's still, he's running full speed, but there's a difference between getting back and running full speed at 4.58 and versus 4.41 or 4.39. There literally is millions of dollars at stake for a cornerback. So he's going to work out April 15th. He's excited about it. Joe Evans working out at fullback as well as defensive end. He's 6'1", 246. Had a 41.5-inch vert. That is unbelievable. That's explosion. And his numbers were great in most areas. I think he ran a 4.67, which is good for an edge rusher. He said right now it's about 50-50, Rob, on what teams want him, edge or fullback. And I think he's the type of guy that maybe he gets drafted, maybe he doesn't. I could see a team throwing a late, 7th round flyer on him and see what happens. But probably a guy that, if nothing else, he'll be on a practice team in the fall and working out at multiple positions, and then they'll sign him to what they call a futures contract, like it's the day after the season's over with, and spend all off season figuring out, okay, are you a fullback or are you an edge rusher, and then put him in that position. So I think
he'll help on special teams. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. There are players, Rob, that we've been around that, we know their talent level and we know what they can do. Joe Evans is one of the toughest MFs that we've been around. I mean, he is like, if you put like a list of like top 5 captains of the Ferentz era, he's on that list. It's hard to quantify who's won, but he's a leader to the nth degree and will do anything for that team, for any team that he's on. And tough kid, chip on his shoulder, done it all the right way. Logan Lee took some passes as a tight end. So tight end, you may be extended to a defensive lineman, but he said
if you think about these guys, Scott, Evans was a quarterback and a linebacker, and they weren't sure what Logan Lee was going to play when he got here.
Right. Exactly. And they flipped him over to D line, and he was a 2-year starter. He was really good there. Most of the NFL still wants him there. That's where he worked out at the Shrine Bowl. That's where he worked out at the Combine. But there were, he said, 3 different teams that kind of said, let's see how you do catching passes and stuff. And he also took some long snaps and short snaps. So I think with Logan Lee, there's a couple of ways you can approach this. One is, let's see if he can be not only a backup defensive lineman, but maybe a end on our field goal unit and catch a pass out of, for a fake or something like that. Or if we're in a pinch and we need a backup long snapper, he's our guy. And then, something that I've wondered about him for a long time is, he said he was 289 the other day. He weighed in at 281 at the Combine. What if the team says, let's get you to 310 and make you a lineman, offensive lineman, kind of like Brian Madison, Mike Kroll, Matt Nelson.
Yeah.
I could see that too with him, if he can put on that kind of weight, another 25 pounds and move over the offensive side of the ball, he might have a career there, because Matt Nelson was probably not going to make it in the NFL at all as a defensive lineman. But, and I don't know, he's unsigned now, but he's had 4 or 5 years in the NFL as an offensive lineman and played. So that's also something. And, I think he'd make a team as a defensive lineman, but he might have more staying power on the other side. So Torrey showed up, he didn't have to run. Just kidding. And then Nico and Rusty were part of it too. And we'll see what happens. Eric All, I think Eric All will get some good play in his career, but he's, he's probably more of like a, hey, let's redshirt him type of guy, or at least get him completely healthy before he's out there doing anything.
Get him on the bus and find a seat later on. Plenty of good guys in this class, not a huge class of hot, early draft picks like Iowa's had some seasons last year, for example, 2 first-rounders, but still a really good group and a really good group of guys that I think that the character, what they bring to a locker room, that matters, and it'll matter for this group as well. And we'll talk a lot more football, spring football moving forward, but we got to fit some basketball in here because it's March and the tournament tips off in like an hour. Let's start with the women. Number 1 seed. We'll head to Albany if it can win these 2 games this week, and certainly will be heavily favored to do so. There's a first 4 game today with Holy Cross and Tennessee Martin, and the winner of that gets Iowa Saturday afternoon, 2 p.m. on ABC. And the other game is West Virginia and Princeton, which will follow the Iowa game on Saturday. I know a lot's been made, Scott, of the difficulty of Iowa's bracket, but I've looked at it, and when I was filling my bracket out, I'm like, LSU isn't as good as it was last year. I don't think it's even really that close to what it was last year. It's still a really good, dangerous team, but I still think Iowa is in really good shape here.
The one thing that we have to acknowledge is that they're only playing one team in that bottom half of the bracket. They're playing one team in the Sweet 16, and they're playing one team in the Elite 8. They're not playing them all. They don't have to go through Kansas State and Colorado, LSU and UCLA. They just go one step at a time. So when you take that, you got to take that step back, or Louisville even is. Yeah. It's just that we're aware that last year's final championship run went through 16 against Louisville or against Colorado, 8 against Louisville, championship game against LSU. Oh, by the way, they played Kansas State 3 times. And then UCLA is a team that flirted with being a number 1 and is a number 2. So there are a lot of stacked teams in this bracket. It's how do they manage it? It's going to come down to game, and this team is in great shape for that. I think when you break it down, West Virginia and Princeton have some some potential to cause some
Cause
issues with Iowa.
problems, yeah.
Yeah.
And we saw that with Georgia last year.
Yeah. Georgia was one of their more difficult games. And because they're very physical and really
Basketball is
not.
so much about matchups, man.
Yeah.
It really is. And
Mhm.
and we've talked about them on this podcast, Scott, what kryptonite might be overstating it, but teams with good post players could cause Iowa problems.
Yeah. And the good thing is in their second round game, neither team really has one. I mean, Princeton does have a forward who has been the 3-time Ivy League Defensive Player of the Year, 10 rebounds a game. But they also are a team that slows it down. They're 51 points allowed per game. But they're both teams, their top 5 leading scorers are guards. And if you're matching guards versus guards,
good luck.
Yeah, this is Iowa. And now I think the challenge that West Virginia has is they have a guard who's really good, JJ Quinterly, and she averaged I think 19.6 points per game, and she also is the defensive player of the year in the Big 12. So if Iowa is sloppy, throwing passes away, missing shots, and they're getting run on a little bit, and her defense is causing some issues for Caitlin Clark or for Kate Martin or whatever, then you could see the potential for maybe not an upset, but maybe a very, very close game like we had last year. But that said, it's easy to overanalyze the team's weaknesses and instead of examining their strengths, which is if Iowa's running and gunning and playing the way it wants to, crown them. They're winning the title. And I think they'll get out of Iowa City. They'll play, I think, probably more Colorado. And Drake's in there, too, for that matter. Probably play Colorado or, I would even bet on them over Kansas State. The challenging game again. But none of these teams have number 22. And I'm betting 22 whenever I can.
And at least for these first 2 games, Scott,
this
weekend, they also got a hell of a home court advantage. And you're going to see teams that are not used to playing in that environment going, holy shit. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Some of the Big Ten schools were used to it when they came in here, but it's still tough to overcome that home court advantage. Iowa's crowds this year have just been fantastic, and I would think it's going to take it to the next level this weekend.
No question. You're going to see, this is the last time they're going to be playing there. This is the last weekend, last night, Monday night, we'll ever see the number 22 grace a women's basketball uniform again. And you don't think that this crowd's going to be energetic, wanting number in all of them, because they're all beloved, locally, Kate Martin, Gabby Marshall, Molly Davis. I don't know if she'll be able to play. I doubt it, but they're all beloved and they are so rabid behind them all. But to see 22, this is like MJ wearing 23 in the Bulls uniform. And Princeton, I don't think plays in front of a crowd like this.
No, I'm guessing their gym's similar to like City or West High.
Yeah, if they're lucky, more like Regina, probably
or West Branch.
Yeah, so if they're playing Iowa, oh my gosh, and they're gonna get some residue from the first game. Now, I would guess that half to 2/3 probably leave after Iowa's game, but still they'll leave a sizable chunk in the audience. And then if you're the winner between Holy Cross and UT Martin. Yeah, and you're going, but they're a 16 seed. They know the deal, and it's
I saw cool Dargan from Hawk Central tweet that if Tennessee Martin wins and plays in a sold-out Carver Hawkeye Arena on Saturday, it would be bigger than the population in Martin, Tennessee.
Really? No way. That's funny.
Which is interesting. I found that interesting. But this is it's quite the show. And I know some people were upset about the ticket situation, Scott, but they sold out during the season, and those people deserve first crack.
That's That's the benefit. That's why, people, and
Like
I know
your
that,
life.
yeah, exactly. And she bought them in advance, years in advance. And
Yeah.
that's what the reward is, that you were with this team before it became the hottest ticket in the country. And I know obviously they sold out the season in August, and before that they had to put a hold on it because the demand was like 5K over.
And then Kinnick Stadium.
Yeah, and Kinnick Stadium, just the experience that we've had with women's basketball in the last year, but specifically last 18 months or so, has been second to none. But that's what happens. You got a demand. It's not like it was, Rob, 10 years ago when Iowa would host, and then all of a sudden we got, like, on Monday night, we got Jan Jensen coming on and saying, come on, let's support our team and come out and buy some tickets to these games, and we want to have a big crowd. And they don't have to do that. Maybe in the future they will, but they certainly don't have to now. And I like these matchups for Iowa. I think if Iowa plays well, it's going to be, name the score Saturday. I mean,
Yep.
it wouldn't be surprising to me if they double up their opponent.
That's
maybe
good.
Maybe more.
Get some of those kids that work hard in practice a chance to play in the NCAA tournament a little bit.
Yeah. And then Monday night, that Lisa was really surprised when she found out it was going to be Saturday, Monday, because I asked her, I said, you got any inkling on what the times are going to be? And she goes, well, I think it's going to be Friday, Sunday, like it's been in the past. And then Bailey Turner and the SID piped in and goes, they just announced it's Saturday, Monday. She's like, what, really? And I'm like, trying to explain that ESPN gets that game on Monday night, and ESPN wants the Caitlin Clark rating, and ABC gets it on Saturday. But if it had been Sunday afternoon, it goes to ABC. Monday night goes to ESPN, and ESPN wants, they want 3, 4, 5 million viewers to watch Caitlin Clark play. So they haven't had her really all year, other than a couple of mini little games, So I would expect fireworks. And then Albany, that's going to be a tough drive for people. But I saw earlier this week that the flights were pretty manageable. I haven't seen the prices lately, but
as I tweeted, my podcast partner during the football season on the Rapid Reaction, Jordan Canzeri, is from the Albany Capital District in New York. So he acknowledged my tweet and said, you can hit him up for recommendations if you're going out to the Capital District in New York. So hit up former running back Jordan Canzeri, who I'm sure will be at the games. One more old dude memory that to illustrate the growth of women's basketball. I remember it was Randy Peterson, who's now Randy Henderson, married to Duez Henderson, Kara Consuegra, that senior class at Iowa. They were a 4th seed their senior year, but had to go on the road because Carver had something going on. I don't know if it's gymnastics or whatever, but they were a 4th seed and had to play at 5 seed Utah that year. They won the first round game and then lost a really heartbreaking game to Utah out in Salt Lake City, which will segue us here in a second to the men's basketball conversation. But I don't see that as being something that would happen today, Scott.
No. I think you move whatever else is supposed to be, or you just say no, X, nothing can enter this
Yes.
arena on those days. But no, that's I remember one year also, and this probably 15 years ago. God, I'm dating myself, when they were a higher seed, but this is when the NCAA decided to make campuses automatically. They were hosting no matter.
Yeah,
and they went to Gonzaga one year.
Yeah.
And maybe Rutgers was there too. I can't remember, but I remember them losing to Gonzaga, and Iowa was a 4 seed and Gonzaga might've been a 12, and they won the 12-5, and then they beat Iowa, I want to say, in the second round. And it was like, how fair is this? A 12 seed gets a home court advantage. And, I might be off on a few seed lines there, but
I remember that as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So that'll never happen again. I mean, they really should be having the Sweet 16, like I rant on this all the time, but Albany and Portland, next year it's Birmingham and Spokane. What in the hell are you doing, NCAA? I mean, go to hub cities. Go to Denver, go to Phoenix, go to Dallas, go to Chicago, Indianapolis, Atlanta, Charlotte, whatever. Cities that people can get to easy for flights and that have, people aren't going to drive. I mean, they might drive to Albany. It sucks, but it's a 2-day drive. They weren't going to drive to Portland, and flying to Portland, I know, was costly. So I don't know. The NCAA, man.
Yeah, they missed an opportunity this year too. I know you have to plan ahead, and these sites are determined, a little bit in advance here. But think about Caitlin Clark, second weekend in Madison Square Garden, or whatever the forum is called in LA these days. That would be, I mean, you would grow your game in a major city, Houston, Philadelphia. I mean, you could go down the list, Dallas, Denver,
right,
anywhere.
The hub cities where flights go in and out, Atlanta, or even in Indianapolis. Can you imagine Indianapolis that had the same two set up right now with Albany, where you had Indiana, which is a 4 seed, they're going to lose in the Sweet 16. But if Indiana was home, in Indianapolis playing South Carolina, they'd say unfair advantage. Yet you would have it full. Yeah. Iowa there, Indiana fever, boy. Instead they're going to Albany, New York, which, and you don't even have UConn there. So it's kind of like, why not Lake Placid? We're just making it.
Have you ever? I've been to Lake Placid. It's an outpost.
Yeah.
The delayed segue from the Salt Lake City story is that's where the Iowa men are headed Sunday night, Scott, 8:00 on ESPN2. The Iowa men will be at Utah in the second round of the NIT tournament after the Hawkeyes won against a good Kansas State team on Tuesday. That was a good win for the program, and I thought it was a good example of two teams that wanted to play in this tournament. There's been a lot of talk about, teams that have turned down NIT opportunities. I think we saw on Tuesday night at Carver Hawkeye Arena that this can be a valuable tournament if teams choose to use it.
Yeah, and participate if nothing else.
Yep.
So I think what you look at with this is it's a great opportunity for Iowa, and Fran is handling it right. I did not approve myself of these teams that decided to back out. I think it's weak. I understand it's the portal and players are going to leave. All right, well, you still have younger players you can develop. You can still coach them. It's still part of the season. It's like
they recruit during the year. Yes. What the hell's the difference? They recruit all season.
And we're talking basketball. It's not like football where you're going to lose 14 players or, and then all of a sudden you've got to really hurry to get it. I mean,
do you think it's the money? Do you think they don't want to invest in having to, like, Iowa's going to have to foot the bill to go to Salt Lake City? I wonder if part of it is like, some of the school, like St. John's, for instance, doesn't have a huge budget, just says, listen, we're not going to pay for this team to fly around the country for the NIT.
It could be. That's a legitimate question. And that's the one that the NCAA has to respond to. Mm-hmm. Because if teams are not playing in the postseason and the NIT because they can't afford it, then you've got to reevaluate your entire postseason. But then again, that's something like bowls. I mean, you go to a mid-level, lower-level bowl, most teams lose money. Now the Big Ten doesn't, but that's because they share. they split the losses and then they share the revenues. And but lower leagues like the MAC, if they go to the Bahamas Bowl, they're not making any money on that. They're losing money. That said, it's an opportunity for your players to spend more time together and grow and play. It's an opportunity for your coaches to do the same thing. Now, if this means that they need to redo it and reevaluate what a NIT is instead of going on the road and Iowa flying to Utah. Hell, I remember in 2012, I flew to Oregon for an NIT game.
Devin Marble game.
Devin Marble, 7 3-pointers, in the first 7 3-point attempts. I mean, amazing game. But, I think
Again,
kind of
we
like,
talk about all the money that's involved in these schools have. I think they can afford to send
yeah,
a
right.
basketball team to Salt Lake City or,
Yeah,
Oregon or something like that.
right. And I know it's not what you wanted, it's not what you think you deserve, but it's an opportunity to play. For Iowa, you've got players like Patrick McCaffrey and possibly Tony Perkins, playing their last, Ben Cricky playing their last games at the University of Iowa. You also have younger players, your freshmen, who have an opportunity to compete again and develop a little bit more. And maybe it's good for everybody and the coach to, again, coach his players. And I understand the portal is opening, which is ludicrous again.
Yeah.
Why don't you push this back to like the Wednesday after the national championship?
Which is what, 2-3 weeks from now?
Yes, exactly. And we're going to see the same shit in the fall where, where signing day is in the middle of championship week. Are you kidding me? God, these people are stupid, but
who are they listening? Who's giving these people advice?
I have no idea. It's just ridiculous. I mean, the portal, why not wait? And
I think Scott, had, and this isn't a huge deal, but had the portal not open till after the tournament, I think DeSante Bowen would have waited to go into the transfer portal, but he knows he wants to move on. He's seeing other people go into the portal. So instead of being able to finish out the season with his team, granted, he's hurt and he can't play, but if you've watched Iowa basketball and been to the games, he's engaged. The guys like him. There's not an adversarial relationship. He's going somewhere where he can play more. But it kind of messes him up. It messes up him going through this experience with his friends, because Homer made friends with these Iowa guys. Yeah. We saw it with Caden Proctor going on spring break with the Alabama guys. Yeah. They're friends. We don't see that as much, but kind of crappy for DeSante to have to make this decision now.
Well, yeah, you want to get your name out there. You want to get teams interested, and then the coaches are looking at it like, I know I've got players going in the portal, and so therefore I got to make sure I start looking around in the portal. Well, again, it's basketball. You're looking at a handful of players versus
right.
There was 1,000 that entered, and there was like 1,500 players that entered within a week of the portal opening, if even smaller than that. With football, that's different. This one, it's like, oh, you can just look down the list, look at their stats. And you can have staffers start to identify them, start to look at, well, does this player fit? No. Okay, let's look at somebody else. I just don't see the urgency for that. And then likewise with the NIT. But that said, Iowa took care of business against a good team, like you said. I mean, these were two teams that if the tournament was, 80 teams, they both would be in it. And they both, looked the part. They've played well at times. And now they're going to Utah, another team that was really on the bubble, like Iowa, late in the season. And you just continue to keep playing. And then this year, I think the NIT finals are in Hinkle, in Indianapolis. So that's kind of interesting in its own right.
Yeah, that'll be cool. I think, grew up used to it being in Madison Square Garden, but it'll be cool to have it in Hinkle Fieldhouse. And that might be the answer to increasing the NIT popularity too, is maybe moving it around to different historic venues or things like that. There's things you can do to create interest if you're doing the right things and thinking of the right things and not putting transfer portals in bad times or signing days at inconvenient times. You would think that you would want to help your member institutions, but I don't know. We drive ourselves crazy trying to figure out the thought process of the decision makers in these instances. So there's no sense in doing it. We won't go into this too deeply because Scott and I have been super busy on other things and haven't really dove into the nationals for wrestling. But this is Iowa, and they kind of like wrestling here. So we just want to touch on that quickly. That starts today, goes through into the weekend. I think from an Iowa perspective, Scott, this is a chance to end what has been a disappointing season for various reasons, some in their control, some out of their control, to end the season on a high note.
Yeah, that's what you got to look at it. I mean, whether it's I mean, Dan Gable would say it back in the day that if you're disappointed, you still want to make sure you finish as high as you possibly can. If the destination that you want isn't there, then you go to the next highest one possible. And that includes, in this situation, it's, finishing out as strong as you can and
wrestle above your seed, right?
Right. And, the highest ones are Real Woods and Drake Ayala. And then you got like Michael Caliendo as a 6 and Zach Glazier, who I think has been a bright spot this year, if nothing else, at 97. But, this is not. And then there have been other wrestlers like Jared Franick, who was an All-American previously and is now a 10 seed. Now, that's the kind of guy that you say, we need you to get in the top 8. We need you to be an All-American again.
Yep.
Brody Teske has had a year up and down year. You're a 15 seed. Go be an All-American. And it's been a challenging year, no question, with all the gambling wiping out most of their team. But they've kind of disappointed themselves too, because I don't think they've really wrestled up to their capabilities. Certainly in that Michigan duel, I think that was the worst duel I've ever seen from an Iowa team. And to finish 4th at Big Tens, and they seemingly could be out of the top 5 and not have a wrestler on Saturday night. And God knows how long. I mean, when's the last time that happened? I have no idea.
I don't either. I would imagine it's probably been a while, and it probably hasn't happened a whole lot in the history. I know the wrestling fans that are listening to us are probably like, "You idiots! It happened." So,
yeah.
Sorry, well, that not my area of expertise. I don't claim to be a wrestling expert. I watch. I root on the Iowa kids to do well, but not my area of expertise. But I will be watching this weekend and hoping to see the program be able to build some momentum, because that's really what this is about, building some momentum going into next year. Next year, you've got, Keeter seemingly being a full-time wrestler, Gabe Arnold, some other younger guys that are coming up into the system. Ayala's back, a lot of guys back. So you kind of you need something to build on, and this is an opportunity to have something to build on.
Yeah. It's kind of like the NIT right now. And of course, we never, ever, ever discuss that with Iowa wrestling, because it's, generally it's, if you don't finish first, it doesn't really matter, but you still got to wrestle. You still got to compete, and you still got to compete to the highest ability. And I think in this case, you don't want to become
Nebraska football or Indiana basketball that thinks they think that they're entitled to something. You got to go out there and do it.
Right. And in this case, they got to go out there and prove it and try to get as high, maybe a Drake Ayala or Real Woods gets to Saturday night.
Yep.
Maybe somebody like, Michael Caliendo gets to the semis, or Zach Glazier bursts through and maybe he gets to the championship, that sort of thing. I think that's what you strive for. And in this case, finish out strong, see how they've improved. Obviously they're going to go in the portal and they're going to load up. And, but I'm always intrigued anytime you bring up Ben Keeter, just because, now with football practice starting, the kids had like no layoff at all. I wonder how long it's going to take both ways, but next year he might be the heavyweight, and he also could be I don't know about starter, but certainly a key contributor on the football field. So that's going to be something to watch, because I don't know that you can do this many more years of both, because they're so grueling.
I'm with you. I'm rooting for him, but it's obvious it doesn't happen very often these days. The two sport athletes at this level, much more common back when Scott and I had less weight on us and less gray hair. I'll speak to myself and for myself, and it was that way back in the day. Dana Hughes, people like that. But
Bo Porter.
Bo Porter, right. Scott, we'll wrap up with just touch on a little bit of Iowa baseball here. The Hawkeyes have won 4 in a row after losing to Georgia last Tuesday, came back, put a whooping on your Leathernecks, score 11-1, 17-7, 19-9, and then beat Grandview 25-3 on Tuesday. So some momentum going into this weekend. The Big Ten is here, Scott. Friday, March the 22nd, tomorrow, 3 p.m. in West Lafayette against the Purdue Boilermakers, 3-game set down there.
Yeah, this is probably something that they needed, to play the mighty Leathernecks, in Grandview out of Des Moines. But they needed to win some games. They needed to feel good about themselves and have
thoughts going.
And just sometimes that's just, they played some really tough teams. I mean, they did not decide let's ease into the season and dip our toes in the water. I mean, they're playing a 3-game set at Ole Miss. They're playing Georgia. They're going to Florida and playing these great teams. And here they are. They've got, Big Ten seasons here. And it's probably been, I would say, disappointing, first month or so of the season. But that said, they got a chance now, and I always bet on Rick Heller. He's a terrific coach. He's done a great job there, and so I expect him to, And now it's about going through Big Ten season and doing what they normally do.
So, and on this break, I saw Baseball America had its first mock draft. They do those for baseball as well, and Brody Breck checked in at number 15.
Okay,
in the mock draft overall. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, I
think he made the right choice.
Yeah. When we're talking about Ben Keeter, it's a little different, and and Brody Brecht, of course, being a pitcher, of course, it's with him. It's about control. If he can ever channel that control, he's going to be just lethal, whether it's as a closer or a starter at the next, in the MLB level. But
it's kind of like the height in basketball. You can't teach height, and you can't teach somebody pumping 100 mile per hour octane up there. And the MLB organizations are like, yeah, we can work with that.
Yeah, exactly. We can reshape this. We can do that. Yeah, he's kind of, for us old dudes, Nuke LaLoosh,
Yeah, exactly.
Where you're like, hit the bull, but that said, he's got a thunderbolt, he's been blessed, and I know I'm anxious to see how he does. And for that matter, I hope Marcus Morgan can kind of get back on track, and Caden Obermuller is going to be, I think, a really solid starter. And if, for Iowa, the difference between being an NCAA tournament team and not is probably going to be their bullpen.
Yep.
And that's what needs to really take some strides. So hopefully they can iron out some issues here going forward.
Yep, we're into the Big Ten, and Iowa goes in at 11-9 and needs to put together a good Big Ten regular season and Big Ten tournament. First home series a week from tomorrow, March the 29th, Friday. Minnesota comes to town for a 3-game set. So talk a little bit about that next week on the podcast. But that'll do it for this one. We've run it about an hour and a half. Got to a lot here, spent a lot of time, probably more time on Caden Proctor than we anticipated, but it's a very involved, layered conversation that I think we needed to have. So we did, and got through. Hopefully everybody's brackets are great and you don't get blown out the first weekend like I often do. Who you got in your who's your national champ? We don't have much time. Who are your national champions?
Kentucky Wildcats. I went with a kind of a different edge there. I just think they have such upside
loaded with talent.
If they can kind of work through some magic and get there, and beating Iowa State in the championship, by the way. Yeah. And then the other one is South Carolina beating Iowa for the championship.
Same with me. I had the same as you on the women's side. The men's side, I'm Mr. Chalky. I picked Houston over UConn in the championship game.
All right.
I think Houston bounces back from the ass whooping at the hands of Iowa State and makes its run in this tournament. And everybody will be rooting for Kelvin Sampson because they love the man.
You know what's funny, Rob, is if you let's conclude this on NCAA stuff. When you talk about him getting fired at Indiana for the stuff he did, that's now like legal, and then you talk about Bruce Pearl and the cookout with Aaron Kraft and at Tennessee and all that stuff. I mean, now those are the ridiculous days where it's like, look what they did, and now it's like, it's not that big of a deal.
Well, the NCAA gives us reasons to shake our head, but it also gives us content. So thank you for that. And thank you to you guys for listening. We really appreciate it. We appreciate our sponsors a whole lot. And please look them up if you would, and pay them off for supporting our podcasts and letting us bring these to you free of charge. No Patreon, any of that stuff. So have a great weekend. Enjoy the tournament. Enjoy the Carver Hawkeye Arena. If you guys are headed over there and are fortunate enough to have tickets, cheer your loudest. And Scott and I will be back to talk to you next week. Until then, peace. Say goodbye, Scott.
Goodbye, Scott.